What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Inside the Burrow, hosted by FAU Owl's Nest. I am your new host today, Kevin Fielder. Robbie, you've been relegated to the bench role because you've had other issues. According to your Twitter account, the streets in Miami don't give you good tire traction. So he's driving back from Miami, Florida. We're also joined by Richard Pereira. Richard has followed the FAU signing class, which is a big topic for today's episode. Richard, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Kevin. It's great to talk to you guys, you and Robbie. It's going to be an exciting year. Well, a great offseason for FU football after a tough 2023 campaign, seeing them go 3-9 and having head coach Tom Herman be let go. But now they embark on a new journey, going with Zach Kittley, the offensive coordinator of Texas Tech, who had a prolific offense and a lot of passes thrown in the air, like a lot of air raid offenses, and a pretty good solid run game to include on top of that. So it's gonna be a fun time for FU football in the coming months. For the offseason, and of course this playing class that we're going to talk about very soon.
Robbie, real quick, how are you doing as we make the trip from Miami to Boca? A trip that no one ever wants to make. Let's be clear.
No, never again. I've never been to FIU's campus, and at this point now, in my fifth year, like at FAU student media, whatever, I don't think I'll ever make it. So I'm doing good, but the only thing that turned that into a positive was FAU got a win. Even though I wasn't there, at least I got the win. So that's a positive, and now we're almost home, so that's good too.
We're going to start today's episode with the big news out of FAU football, and that is, as Richard alluded to, the hiring of Zach Kittley as their new head coach. He replaces Tom Herman, who coached 2 seasons with the Owls. Kittley, more known probably for his time with Western Kentucky the year where he helped lead the Hilltoppers quarterback Bailey Zappi to one of the most historic seasons out of a college football quarterback ever. He set passing touchdown records. They set offensive records that may never be broken, except by maybe another Zach Kittley offense. Hopefully. Really, fingers crossed on that one. I would love a season where they have 60 passing touchdowns. More recently, though, Kittley spent his time in Lubbock, Texas, as the Texas Tech offensive coordinator. I believe he spent 2 or 3 seasons there before moving his way to Boca. Robbie, let's start with you. Initial reactions to this move, because in true Brian White fashion, this one comes out of left field.
Yeah, I think it's exciting. I think it fits that mold that a lot of schools are going after of the up-and-coming coordinator. It's interesting from a sense because a lot of people with FAU, FIU, USF, UCF, the number one thing they look for a coach down here is Florida ties. And he doesn't have that, but he has everything else that makes him an intriguing option for a young head coach, including coming from, an up-and-coming coach. Cliff Kingsbury, a solid area system he built, and he learned from that. So exciting, and I think he'll build up his Florida ties here over the next couple of years. And overall, though, I think it's exciting. Who's going to be on staff?
Rich, I want to shift to you. We've seen multiple high-name coaching and I guess notable players as well reach out. I was trying to figure out how to frame Patrick Mahomes, arguably the best quarterback in the NFL. We've also seen Cliff Kingsbury, Joe McGuire offer words of praise, I guess, for Zach Kittley heading into this new tenure with FAU. And none of that's surprising. Every time a guy leaves, they only have good things to say about the guy who leaves for a head coaching job. But Rich, I guess when you had found out that it was Zach Kittley, when every name thrown out there, even by us on this podcast, were Florida names, guys like Willie Simmons, guys like Tim Harris Jr., guys who have coached in Florida, know the Florida area. What was your initial reaction when they went with a guy who I think was born and raised in Texas?
Yeah, definitely, Kevin. So when it comes to Zach Kittley, Obviously, yeah, I believe it to be a very solid hiring. Getting somebody who knows how to run an offense, how to develop quarterbacks, especially with Patrick Mahomes being mentioned, and then of course Bailey Zappi, who had a spectacular final year at Western Kentucky, where they had a solid season, won the Boca Raton Bowl, on top of a spectacular performance from Zappi himself. And he went on to go to the NFL. Same with Mahomes. And of course, Mahomes is having the bigger and better career as a superstar in the NFL, but I digress. Kittley, coming from Texas, it's kind of been a running trend for Brian White, hiring coaches who know the Texas area, whether it's in football and basketball, funny enough. So it was obviously important for FU to consider getting a coach who can recruit in the Florida area. And I'm sure when it comes to Kittley's coaching staff, I'm sure that will definitely be taken into account, and it should be taken into account. But in terms of expertise of having a great offense and understanding the modern landscape of NIL, especially in FU's case, who will have a lot of work to do in terms of adding players to the roster, whether it's via recruiting or through the transfer portal. And for Kittley to be the coach over the likes of Willie Simmons, among other Florida-based coaches who know the area better and probably could build a program like FU to a higher level. Simmons, as an example, who did very well at FAMU. Kittley presents a profile and resume that shows you that he can win anywhere he goes. At Western Kentucky, Houston Baptist, and most recently Texas Tech. So it's going to be very interesting to see the direction that Kittley will take this FU football program, starting with his introductory press conference on Friday, and then of course signing day also happened on this past Wednesday, and then in the coming months what he does in the offseason and before spring camp comes to FU football next year.
Robbie, I want to shift this over to looking ahead. And there are a ton of question marks for Florida Atlantic football heading into the offseason. And arguably no more notable than who is coaching with Zach Kittley and who will be leading this offense, because the quarterback is a very important position on a football field. And FAU has lost a few quarterbacks, to the transfer portal. Robbie, what's the most important thing that Zach Kittley has to do over these next few weeks to have a successful first season in Boca?
Yeah, to me, number one, obviously, you want to get somebody in there with head coaching experience, whether that's Chad Lunsford, I don't know, but a Chad Lunsford type coach who had some success as a head coach, didn't work out, but wants to keep on building up and get back there. Somebody like that who he can lean on for decisions that, might not be firsthand for somebody who hasn't been a head coach before. So that's obviously up there, but also, if possible, that same veteran coach having Florida ties in the recruiting market. I mean, Kittley seems like a very personable guy that's going to be able to adapt and build his own roots down here in South Florida. But somebody right away that can come in and vouch for him that already has these high school connections in the area, that would be huge. And then, that same type of thing with a head coach who's been in this era of the transfer portal will be huge, because obviously Kittley knows about it. But he hasn't, been the first-hand decision guy on a transfer portal piece. So that's going to be just somebody for him to lean on. Somebody that is close to this area and also a veteran for me. Whether that's the defensive coordinator or quarterbacks coach, I'm not sure. But, a defensive coordinator who's a veteran with Florida ties. I'm describing Rock Bellantoni. I don't know, again, if it's going to be Rock Bellantoni, but somebody that fits that bill.
Of note, because it's been mentioned a few times on this show, the Florida ties can be solved pretty easily. There are quite a few coaches on staff, should Zach Kittley choose to retain him, that have coached in the state of Florida, that have recruited the state of Florida well. A few names that stand out to me: cornerbacks coach Brandon Harris spent the one game as the defensive coordinator throughout that transition. Rock Bellantoni, as Robbie mentioned, loves this area. Safeties coach Derek Gibson and running backs coach Chris Perkins, two other names that could potentially be retained on staff, though. Of course, Kittley probably will bring in some coaches that he's familiar with. Rich, I want to finish or close off this segment with the dreaded game that we all love, the expectation game. Rich, year one for Zach Kittley, 2 years at FAU under Tom Herman, did not result in a bowl game. This year they were eliminated from bowl contention fairly early. What is a realistic year one for Zach Kittley at FAU?
First off, anything better than a 3-9 record would be a minor step in progress.
That feels like that feels like the bare minimum of you got to win at least 4 games.
It's definitely the bare minimum. When it comes to like at the very least be competing for bowl games, not when the season's on the line in the final week of the season, but at the very least getting some wins here and there throughout the course of the season where you are on track to secure bowl eligibility. Like you're 10 games in, you have like a 5-3 record. To show that you're making actual progress of winning games against opponents that you should have a chance at beating and punching above your weight against the opponents who are expected to beat you, but you find ways to make it difficult for them to actually get a win against you. Just show me that type of fierce competition throughout the entirety of the roster at the quarterback spot, the running back spot, wide receivers, which will be a very important position under Kittley's direction. Wide receivers like getting a lot of chances to make catches from quarterbacks, and the quarterback and wide receiver position is going to be very crucial for FU to flourish as an offense under Kittley, who's offensive minded and having an air raid style offense. Is those two positions are going to be very important. So how Kittley approaches recruiting and the transfer portal is going to be very interesting to see throughout these coming months. And for Kittley, he has to show that like what he learned from Houston Baptist, Western Kentucky, and Texas Tech, bring that winning and team building over to FAU. That should be the expectation for FAU fans, and to show that all those things that he learned throughout his previous stops can lead to success in Boca Raton at Howard Schnellenberger Field at FAU Stadium.
Robbie, I was not avoiding you when I asked Richard that question first because I know you love the expectation game here. Robbie, year one, let's just focus on year one and not 3 years, 4 years down the road, because no one knows what 3 years and 4 years down the road looks like in college football. Robbie, year one under Zach Kittley, what is considered a successful season?
Well, I do personally believe that 6 wins is attainable at FAU, even with this difficult schedule. And why this should be the expectation, in my opinion, is because this is a guy who has a serious chance to kind of boost this fan base right now. Because let's be honest, the last 2 years, even going back to the last 4 years before the bowl game with Willie, that just hasn't done any favors for the fan base. Like, the fan base at FAU is just, a lot of the students aren't diehard football fans. But a 6-win season in year one of a new head coach who's running a fun offense, who's young, he's 33 years old. I mean, look at what Kenny Dillingham does with the Arizona State fan base. I think if he can get 6 wins in year one, it can have effects off the field that will do huge things for FAU football, in the same way that the basketball arena is rocking every weekend. If they're out there scoring 30 points and they're getting postseason football, it's going to be a whole new regime of FAU football. And so that's why I do think year one, 6 wins needs to be the benchmark, just because it's gonna do so much for a fan base that just hasn't had much to look forward to over the past 4 years.
One final note on Zach Kittley, and this is something that shout out Eric Henry, who now works for Horns 24/7, covers Texas. He used to cover FIU for Underdog Dynasty, brought up. No team in Florida has tried to run the air raid offense. FIU ran something sort of similar with their offensive coordinator, David Yost, but it's not the air raid. It's a very run-heavy still scheme. Miami's never done it. They run a very pass-heavy offense with Cam Ward, but it's not the air raid. Florida State, UCF, UCF and USF in particular, with the Josh Heupel strand, they don't run air raid offenses. Zach Kittley is, by my understanding, the first coach in at least FBS Division I college football to try the air raid in South Florida, in Florida in general. And it's not the air raid in the sense that they're going to throw the ball 75 times and never run the football. They're still going to run the football about 20, 25 times a game if his time at Texas Tech is any indication. But no team has ever tried it in South Florida. So it will be very interesting to see how the athletes down here and the speed that they have sort of translate to an offense like that, because it is an offense that's so predicated on matchups and on athleticism and winning horizontally as you win vertically. So it will be an interesting shift for FAU, and feels like there's no better time to start the conversation on everyone's favorite time, National Signing Day. FAU announced 17 players. 17 players yesterday during Wednesday's early signing period. 15 of them from the state of Florida, 8 from the Tri-Counties, Miami-Dade, Broward, and of course Palm Beach County. Zach Kittley said, top to bottom, this is an incredible class. Of course, he had no say in any of this class. He was hired about 3 days ago. But Rich, I want to start with you because you have covered a lot of these guys' signings and recruitments when they committed to FAU. What are your general thoughts on this year's class?
Obviously, the concern of decommitments was in the air, especially with the firing of Coach Herman. Some players who were originally committed to the class obviously decommitted and tried to look for other prospects elsewhere, which is understandable. And of course, we wish them the best in their journey of finding the best program for their fit. But for the guys who stayed in the class, 17 of them on Wednesday, especially, they're all great players in their own respect, and a bunch of them are 3-star players on 247 and on 3 rivals, etc. And one of them is Jade Card. He's the only 4-star receiver in this class. He's the highest rated, of course, as the only 4-star player in the class. You're going to be the highest rated regardless. But he brings a lot of talent to the receiver position, and it's going to be very amazing to see the potential he brings to the receiving core heading into 2025. And then a lot of defensive players, thanks to Coach Rock's recruiting, Hector Chavez, Zion Parrott, Damon Allen, Robert Lee, who might be a key linebacker to keep an eye on in the future, especially. And Namari Brantley, a very talented 3-star lineman who will definitely provide a lot of stops as a playmaker. And man, it's just like, as I said earlier, most if not all of these guys are 3-star players, according to recruiting outlets. And a lot of them are Florida-based, with 2 of them being from Georgia, Ethan Irvin and Rain Bannock being those guys from Georgia. But everybody else, they each bring a skill set that can benefit FAU in many ways, whether it's at the receiving position, a running back, quarterback, with only one having signed with us, Jordan Magwood. He presents a lot of potential. He has a strong arm, and he has an excellent work ethic that could play an impact on who could be the starting quarterback heading into the 2025 season, depending on how things go with Magwood himself and how Kittley targets the transfer portal, as well as recruiting at the quarterback position. So, but yeah, all in all, and not to mention Brandon Hoach, who is a Boca Raton native, he commits to FAU. Damon Allen, who is also a native to Boca Raton, he commits. So having that close connections to a few of the players in this signing class, especially with Hoach and Allen, that is amazing for FAU to maintain that close connections with their players who know the Boca Raton area, who have garnered a lot of connections, and have amazing talent on top of that, especially Hoach, who could be a key player in the receiving core alongside Jade Card. I am personally very excited to see how those 2 guys do in the receiving group, as well as Jordan Magwood, Damon Allen, Robert Lee, etc. All in all, this class was very, very strong, and I hope to see it grow a little more in the coming months where the other signing days will arrive for the FU football program.
FAU's recruiting class ranked third in the American Conference according to Rivals.com, behind Memphis and South Florida. We don't mention either of those schools on this podcast often, so this may be the only time, if you're a Memphis fan listening to this podcast, you hear good things about Memphis football. Robbie, I want to shift this to you. Obviously, a class that Zach Kittley had no say in outside of keeping players in-house. Who is one player that you think can contribute early for FAU?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Obviously, right now, to me, that number one player currently commit, quote unquote, is Austin. I do think he can be a day one contributor. However, he is potential to university or Boston College. He's signing days tomorrow. Express his like. So that guy, in terms of guys who actually signed that on that dotted line, I have to agree with Rich. I think they covered that receiver just because they don't have talent right now. In these guys that just committed, even though they lost Cam Sapp, I think Jade Card can come in and contribute in this Zach Kittley offense. And then, they can get a couple other guys from the portal and build around them. And then especially if Teddy comes, I think FAU could have two freshman receivers that really make a big impact. We saw with Tulsa, they didn't use their freshman receiver in the early part of the year, and he ended up being their best receiver. These guys have talent. It doesn't matter that, some other guys come in from the transfer portal with a little bit of experience. That'll help. Start them too, get them snaps, but give a chance to these young guys. And I think Jade Card, Teddy Hoffman at receiver for sure. On the defensive side of things, I do like Robert Lee at linebacker, especially just because there's going to be a bit of a gap. Ambush is graduated. I believe Desmond Tisdale may enter the NFL draft. So, there's an open spot at linebacker right there, and he could potentially hop in.
I want to shout out one more linebacker as the guy who sits here and talks only about the South Florida prospects for most of my life. Hector Chavez is a good football player. He is a little bit undersized. He's listed about 5'10", 5'11", so he's not the tallest, most physical linebacker. But that man plays with a passion for the game that is unmatched. And it may take him a year or two to develop into the college game, but he comes from a successful program in Miami, Columbus. And so there is certainly an idea in a sense that this guy could be something in the future. Let's shift this a little bit, Richard, to the big news coming on Monday, which is when the transfer portal officially opens for anyone who is not a graduate transfer. What is one position that FAU needs to upgrade outside of quarterback? Because I don't want this to be the guys, they need a quarterback. So outside of quarterback, what is one position that FAU needs to upgrade, whether it be through the transfer portal or through high school recruiting before February's signing period?
Obviously, I already harped on the quarterback position enough with Jordan Magwood aforementioned. So positions I want to see improve. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the receiving core. First of all, the wide receiver position was very unlucky throughout this past season. A lot of injuries, B.J. Alexander being out for the year, E.J. Horton not getting any, not being available because of injuries as well. Like a lot of guys who were projected to be high in the receiving depth chart, they got hurt. So they had to rely on more players who are more down in the rotation, like Amari Hayes, Jay-Sean Platt before he redshirted early in the season, and Jawari Smith, who did pretty good with the chances he got, and Dom Henry, etc. So it's the receiving position. Although I do believe it's strengthened very well with the guys I mentioned in the recruiting class, I still think FU should have the due diligence to aggressively pursue receivers in the transfer portal to make sure that it can be as strong as possible, especially if you're going to run an air raid style offense under Kittley. You want the best receivers, of course, having the best quarterback that can run an air raid offense. So for the receivers, that should be a huge position. with a second winner honorable mention going to the cornerback position. I think you can do I think that position, while having talented players in their own right, like Dunham, Data Hill, etc., it's that position can always use improvement and finding more players who can make more plays, getting more stops, breaking up passes, making interceptions, etc. Just find guys who can make plays at all times, and the best days will come for FU football, especially when those positions are the best that they can be.
Robbie, let's shift this over to you. One position outside of quarterback that you would like to see FAU upgrade, whether it be through the portal or through high school recruiting. Well, this is awkward. Robbie's not talking, so I'm going to go instead. Robbie is, of course, trying to make the drive from Miami to Boca, which is a drive that is a drive I don't wish on my worst enemy. I'm going to go with defensive end, pass rusher, edge rusher, whatever you call it nowadays. This team needs to generate more pressure. And if anyone listens, I don't know what happened there. If anyone listened to, well, I don't know why my mic keeps muting. Let's try this one more time. If anyone has listened to Zach Kittley's introductory sort of meeting with the team, he mentioned they're going to get aggressive. They're going to get to the quarterback. Well, the only way you get aggressive and get to the quarterback is by getting guys who can rush the passer. And truthfully, they just haven't had a lot of guys who can rush the passer. And it's been a problem under Willie Taggart. It was under Lane Kiffin or Herman. He's changed because the Americans have too many good quarterbacks. Truthfully, not be able to rush the passer. That's their defense. Bobby, real quick for you to basketball, one position that you'd like to see FAU upgrade through the portal or through high school recruiting?
Yeah, for me, I didn't hear anyone else's answers, but it's going to have to be the offensive line. Federico is out of eligibility. Alex Akovich and Dr. Richardson, two starting tackles, are also in the transfer portal. I believe Andre Lamas is also out of eligibility, and Perch, the starting left guard, is in transfer portal as well. That's all 5 starters currently are not technically a part of this roster, so they're going to have to attack that transfer portal, and that's kind of difficult. The G5 O-line market is notoriously not fruitful unless you get lucky and find some guys. So, they're going to have to really work hard at that, and I'm interested to see who they bring in at O-line coach. Somebody maybe down here connections. I don't know, but it's gonna be a big overhaul, and pass protection and run blocking are both huge parts of this stuff. So it's all 5 spots.
Let's shift this over to the hardwood. FAU moved to 5-5 on the season last night, beating the team down south, little brother. If we have to say their name, FIU 88-77. It broke a 3-game losing streak dating back to their loss in Charleston to the Drake Bulldogs. Rich, let's start with you. What was one thing that stood out about FAU's win down in Miami?
Obviously, it's always good to get a win against the team down south, aka FIU. On the road, nonetheless, FAU was searching for the first road win of the season because most of their games, with the exception of Charleston, they were all neutral site games. So there was no opposing fan base to egg on FAU, even though Seton Hall had a pretty good turnout for that last game of the Charleston Invitational. So all in all, this was a good road win for the Owls, though it can always be better. Like the first half, 44% from the field, 20% from downtown, 3 of 15 to count it up. They were winning at halftime, but only by a point. So to see them bounce back from those ups and downs from the first half and have a much better performance in the second half, 20-32, 62.5% shooting from the field in the second half, with 4 of 8 from downtown, coming from downtown, and having great performances from Trey Carroll and Caleb Glenn combining for 46 points. That's pretty good production, especially Trey Carroll, who had a career performance for the Owls. obviously arguably his best of his FU career. So it's great to see him come off the bench and just make plays down the stretch on both sides of the ball, crashing the glass, finding opportunities for his teammates to get shots, and of course playing defense as best as he can. And then Caleb Glenn just being the all-around performer on both sides of the ball. And he's been my favorite player to watch throughout from this Owl squad this season, whether it's him making threes from anywhere beyond the arc and just the posterizing dunks that he can obviously throw down with such force. So, yeah, solid road win for the Owls, and I'm hoping that they can build off it going into their 2-game homestand against Jacksonville and Texas State.
As Richard mentioned, Trey Carroll with a career-high 24 points, Caleb Glenn 22 points off the bench, Bob Miller with 15, and Nicola Moretti with 10 are the only two, or the other Owls, excuse me, not the only two. 4 guys in double-digit scoring is always impressive. Robbie, obviously, you had other circumstances to not allow you to cover the game, but you did say that you were able to watch the game. So, obviously, a tale of two halves. FAU shot 44% from the floor in the first half, 20% from the three-point line in the first half, and then finished that off shooting 50% from three and 62.5% from the floor in the second half. Excuse me. What do you think changed from the first half to the second half for them to look arguably the best they've looked in a while under John Jacobs?
Yeah, I asked Jacobs after the game if there was any adjustments, and usually the answer is no. But to this time, that answer was yes. They called that timeout early after FIU went up 4 with about 16 and change to go in the second half. And he said they came out of that timeout with a focus to get a shot fake and a drive to the hoop. And that's what you saw a lot in the second half. You saw screen game with Baba Miller and Caleb Glenn a lot, and both of them attacked the basket, drew fouls, and you really used that size advantage, which FAU has not used a lot this season. They rely a lot on their three-pointers, and when they're falling, that's going to work. But they've had size advantages against even Charleston, at times against UCF, although UCF had a big man they put in there. But the Owls need to use that size advantage more frequently, attack the rim, and we'll see more performances like this if they can get solid shooting mixed in with a driving focus. I mean, as much as we love Caleb Glenn shooting 40% from three, his strength is driving. So if they surround him with shooters and let him attack the rim, I think that's a path to success going forward. But they just really upped their intensity on drives to the rim, and it worked out for them.
Richard, obviously, we talked a little bit throughout this podcast about some of FAU's struggles in Charleston to lose 2 straight and then head back home and lose a close one to FGCU on a buzzer beater. I don't want to see any more buzzer beaters with FAU. I am through with this. How encouraging is that second half as we head into the home stretch of non-conference play and we shift our focus to the American?
It's obviously very important for the Owls to be adjusting throughout the course of non-conference play so they can be as ready as they can be going into conference play. So seeing the adjustments made in the second half after the ups and downs of the first half, very encouraging. It's very great to see Jacobs utilize the players who are performing well during the course of the game. Like Trey Carroll, he got a lot of minutes, 23 minutes. Caleb Glenn, who was always getting a good chunk of minutes, he got 30 last night. And Moretti, who was being productive as a floor general, with 8 to 10 points and 5 assists in 22 minutes of action. And it's good to see Devin Vanderpool progressing throughout this season. Like he cashed in a 3 that kept FEU in the lead in the first half. So, and he got 14 minutes of action. It's good to see him be active out there on both sides of the ball, getting rebounds, getting a few assists here and there. So it's just a matter of knowing what the opposing offense and defense gives you. If some of your players are cold, utilize the players who are actually doing very good. And that much was seen last night. So as long as they can keep that going, heading into this 2-game homestand against Jacksonville and Texas State, and of course that non-conference finale against Michigan State, which is going to be a must-watch for FU fans everywhere. Just keep it pushing, really, for Coach Jacobs and the Owls.
Robbie, 3 more non-conference games to go. They continue a little homestand with Jacksonville State and Texas State before traveling to East Lansing to play Michigan State. What is one thing that needs to be improved as we head into these final 3 games so that FAU can be playing their best basketball when it counts the most for them? Because while it seems like a at-large bid might be out of the question, the easiest way to make the NCAA tournament always is to just win your conference.
Yeah, the easy answer on offense is consistent shooting. The 3-point shooting is going to be a focal point of this offense. John Jacobs has made that clear. They're going to have to start hitting, in my opinion, at least 40% of their threes. 35 to 40% give consistently for me. That's what I want to see offensively. But on the defensive end, the communication has to reach a point where they're constantly letting people know switches, stuff like that. Just can't. They need to work together to limit open opportunities. FAU's trap defense, the zone that they run at times where they're trapping people consistently, it works and it forces turnovers, but at the same time, then it also allows triples when there's, lack of communication, not switching at the right time. That didn't hurt as much against FIU because they don't shoot the 3, they don't shoot it well, so that wasn't a big part of their offense. But against FGCU, there was a lot of open looks, and FAU, to be fair, they probably saw on tape that FGCU wasn't shooting a lot of threes and weren't necessarily focused on that. But FGCU had to see on the FAU's tape that UCF was cashing open threes. Who else? I mean, it was just UCF was the big one to me, but even Charleston was doing the same thing, and it just hurts. So they found a way to do that. And AAC teams, they're going to have good ball movement, find open guys. So FAU just has to limit open looks defensively, contest as many shots as possible, and get rebounds. That's my third point and final point is limiting offensive rebounds. They lost the offensive rebound battle to FIU. I'm nitpicky. They won the game by double figures, but I don't want to lose the offensive rebound battle to FIU. They need to win those, especially going into conference play.
I think especially when you have a team that is built on size like FAU's is, they have 2 guys who should be grabbing rebounds easier. And the fact that they have struggled to grab offensive rebounds and they give second chance scoring opportunities to some of these other teams, that's why these games are closer than they should be sometimes. Like, truthfully, it's that easy. It's a very, everyone tries to nitpick why something happened. And I get, everyone's looking for the why. Sometimes the why is the easiest answer of, well, you gave them 3 extra chances to score. They were bound to score eventually. Their next game, 5 days away, I believe, 4 days away. I'm very bad at math and time. But they will host Jacksonville, a team that is in the about 150 range on KenPom. They're 4-4. They just got done losing by close to 50 points against the Georgia Bulldogs. Then they'll host Texas State, travel to East Lansing to play Michigan State on December 21st for a mini break, starting their conference play against that team in Tennessee that we also don't talk about. Robbie, Rich, thank you so much for joining me today to talk Zach Kittley, National Signing Day, and, of course, FAU men's basketball. We'll be back next week for another episode. Make sure to follow FAU Owl's Nest on Twitter, Inside the Burrow on Twitter. You can follow all of us on Twitter as well if you really want to. And, of course, as we end every one of these shows, go Owls.
Go Owls.
Hoot 'em.